money as being durable, transferable, divisible, scarce, recognizable, and fungible. Sound. Money.
I mean, I know what cryptocurrency is.
Why don't you tell me what you know about Bitcoin as a jumping off point?
Okay, sure.
Yo, check it. Hey, yo, fuck cash currently. Cuddies pay me in cryptocurrency. For the crystals that I cut with the cutlery. Anonymous, don't have to meet plugs on the corner now. Press enter on the keyboard. I send your order out. 100 miles an hour as we cruise down the Silk Road. Blowing OG out the whip. Tryers trying to stack guap like niggas who work on Wall Street. So I'm chasing buyers. Log in, there's plenty of users and consumers getting high and rich off of their computer. Ain't nothing new, this info wait for everybody, yo. Use it to your advantage to take over your body, yo. Magic mushrooms, I had them eating them like Mario. Blockchain heavy, got it clicking with the Molly flow. And niggas gotta know.
It was founded by a Japanese guy.
Or guys, or girls, going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. True identity still unknown.
Talking about niggas grilling, man. We out here. Lordy. Yeah. I told my Lordy to take a look inside the dark market. Upload the Bitcoin, we going car shopping. Yeah. You wanted me to check out your music page, you not popping. Knock gas out like Bernard Hopkins. I got a computer geek white boy to go to John Hopkins. One Bitcoin worth $8,000. Let's get it. Found the vendor off the tour browser, bought product and flipped it. He just needed a drop addy for where they gonna ship it. It wasn't a scam, he read the forms before he made a decision. Until he ran into his man Skrilla. Yeah. Told him we can do this shit legally, no need for paraphernalia. Just keep your word, I heard here's somebody that'll kill you. I'm on a Coinbase, looking kinda familiar, like I've been here before. I see the transaction on the blockchain, you gotta spin with your boy. Shoot me the address to the wallet, and I'ma send it tomorrow. Just make me want run up in all black on the horse like Zorro. It'll be best to control your temperature, Paco. Put a nigga ass in the footy nails, there won't be nobody there to help you. Coinbase layout super easy, there's no way I can fail you. Use the VPN so the boys have no way to trail you. The move at fast pace, I had to control the hash rate. The value of the Bitcoin decreased, it was a bad day. Misogynist acts use bitches' backs as an ashtray. Skate on bitches like Cascade. I'm out. My lordy got a Bitcoin ATM in his living room. All of the cash I had in my pocket, I wanted to give it to him. With the vision, I'm vicariously living through him. I told my bro it's a way that we can make money even though it's different for him. He got a new job contract, want me to rip it for him. Told me any ideas I had in my mind, go ahead, pitch it to him. My Duke's busting the room like, what are you niggas doing? Get money in that bag, give me the dark way. I told my lordy to take a look inside the dark market. Upload the Bitcoin, we going car shopping. Yeah, you wanted me to check out your music page, you not popping. Knock gas out like Bernard Hopkins. I got a computer geek white boy to go to John Hopkins. One Bitcoin worth $8,000. Let's get it. Found the vendor off the tour browser, bought product and flipped it. He just needed a drop addy for where they gonna ship it. It wasn't a scam, he read the forms before he made a decision. Until he ran into his man Skrilla. With the raps and the Bitcoin, we can make 11 million. Get a dose of me, that's how the medicine heal you. Hear me? Give me though. Give my Bob Lordy. My Bob Lordy.
Not in generations has Wall Street absorbed the number of body blows it took today.
The world has gone.
There are many places to buy Bitcoin. They collect your personal information and jeopardize your privacy. KYC is the illicit activity. BISC is open source. It does not collect user data. You keep your private keys, create or take offers to trade peer-to-peer, and keep your Bitcoin private and secure.
Binance office?
What is a Binance office?
You guys don't have one?
We haven't. We work remotely, but our office in San Francisco is in the Presidio. But
Oh,
I
nice. Okay.
haven't seen that thing since March. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's been pretty fun. We're all living in all over the U.S. and it's working. It's kind of how we started. So like I'm far more productive in my living room, it appears, according to the results.
Nice.
Me too.
Yeah.
Wait, so
growth in an office was like slow. Growth in the living room, vertical.
do you agree with that, Sam? I know you're in your office.
I like offices. I don't know. I
but
know.
Sam, you also sleep in offices, so it's like one in the same.
I do.
Right?
It's also a home. That's right. But
Yeah.
in some sense, that's an even stronger statement.
True.
But yeah, I don't know. Everyone sort of talks about decentralized offices, and I don't know. We see like a 35% productivity drop when people aren't coming into the office.
Interesting.
It's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
Are you an office Nazi? Are you bringing people in like you got to be here, or like how do you kind of go about that?
Yeah, so I think usually when I write sort of posts to the whole company, they improve morale, mostly because they're sort of intended to. This was definitely one of the ones that did not do that. It was maybe
your post that was like everyone come to the office.
That's right. Yeah, that was. I tried to lighten it up, but I don't think anyone bought it. I think everyone saw through that. But not a popular post at the time. I think
not popular
retrospect,
things is it's important to keep your culture the way you need it to be.
Yeah, and if you don't how do you really justify your gotta shake it up once in a while.
Yeah.
That's what'll lead.
How'd you measure the productivity decrease?
It's basically subjective, and I don't have metrics on it. It's just sort of like ballparking, there is a person sort of have a sense of what they've done month X and month Y. They're here for one, not for the other, and X is 1.5 times Y. That and it's just sort of is pretty consistently true. There's some variation in it. There definitely is some variation, and it's not binary. Also being in the office, but it's just there's so many things, small things you miss when you're not in.
And the amount of time it takes to chase and text and coordinate with people.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a 3-person project is just geez, I don't know. 2 is a lot.
It's funny. I think we've seen kind of maybe an uptick in productivity, but that's probably because when we're all together, there are a lot more jokes that get passed around. And so, humor.
Yeah. I also think that
humor hour we have to limit.
Yeah, no, we definitely make sure to waste at least 20% of the day, because otherwise we'd sort of have an unfair advantage from being in the office. But
yeah,
no, I think that your Binance is just designed way more to be functioning as sort of in it's much more the ethos of kingdom states instead of one giant blob moving together.
Right.
Which I don't know, it has its advantages and disadvantages, but it definitely makes decentralized offices way less of a cost.
I think if I have to write a piece on that, it would be us versus the blob. Now that you've created that as the enemy of our system.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Binance versus the blob.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, there's also the variance, right? There's all the companies that have it's sort of a blob without cohesion. It's sort of parts will ooze one way and the rest just doesn't follow, and it's just and those are the most fun, I think, sometimes, just to observe from a third party point of view who has no stake in how well it does.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Y'all, my Bitcoin senses are tingling. I think we gotta redirect this conversation away from remote work.
All right.
So we are missing Lennix and Dan. Lennix is from OKX, Dan from Kraken. I hope that they will arrive. They
12 minutes late to a party.
Yeah, so I mean, we're gonna keep going. We have an awesome group here. We have Catherine Coley, we have Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, and we have Alex from River, Alex Leishman. You guys are all doing amazing things in very different ways in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space. So really excited to have you guys here. The way that Drinks in Quarantine works is, first off, we have rules. So if you break these rules, you drink. Not exactly sure how that works for you, Sam, since it's morning in Hong Kong, but find something to drink. The first rule is no shilling altcoins. So this is Bitcoin Magazine, so we're keeping it to Bitcoin. If you break the rule, the only penalty is you drink. So I guess we can't really enforce anything. You can't say leverage. That's a popular word. So when we say leverage, we drink. And then lastly is you can't say drink. So when you say drink, you drink. So we try to keep it interesting here. We were talking about working remotely, but let's switch it a little bit to Bitcoin. I guess who is in the exchange space do you feel is doing the most with Bitcoin right now? Let's start with Alex. He's Bitcoin only.
Well, I guess I'm biased, obviously. And I guess it also depends on how you define doing more with Bitcoin. I mean, when it comes to different trading products, I would say that we're not doing the most, but we're I think doing the most with protocol level stuff with Bitcoin. We let people use Lightning Network. We have a bunch of different on-chain functionality. We built our own Bitcoin stack from the ground up, and we're rolling out a number of cool non-custodial services coming soon, TM. But I really think that there's a lot of also cool stuff being done with derivatives at the other exchanges. Big fan of seeing like financial products in that space as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that stuff in these conversations.
Cool. Who wants to take it next? Catherine?
Can people hear if I gulp? I've never gulped on camera, so I just want to make sure that while I'm drinking, I'm not making noises. In the Bitcoin space, what are we doing? We're kind of slicing it up in different ways for different users. The experience you have with getting into a digital asset of Bitcoin specifically, we got to make it work for you. So we allow people to buy it easily through a buy crypto button. We've just set up recurring buys as well for that. So that's kind of great, letting people automate the way that they can grow into their positions in Bitcoin and have it, directly from your bank account from the 1st and 15th month after a pay date. So in case your company doesn't let you allocate any Bitcoin from your payroll, we kind of do it for you. And the fees are lower than any service that we would normally get. If you invest like $100, I think it's like $100 a week for a year, that's only $26 in fees versus everyone else in the United States is charging almost another month of Bitcoin. So we provide the lowest fees in America for Bitcoin. You can also trade it. We've got a bunch of Bitcoin pairs and continuing to add to those. And then we have an OTC desk, an OTC portal, which is really helpful for people that want to buy big.
All right. So everyone's talking about how they're using Bitcoin, which is awesome. Sam, I feel like FTX has been able to do the most unique and creative things, and obviously powered by Bitcoin. You want to talk a little bit about, I guess, what's the mentality into coming up with futures markets and these kind of things and actually executing on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think the biggest things that we're thinking about are like, what do people want? That's sort of where we try and start always. And, there's lots of sources of that. One, like what's working right now. And, we certainly look at what other players are doing. We've not come up with perpetual swaps. When we launched FTX, we thought that the quarterlies were going to be the primary product. And the perps we were kind of borderline on. And like after 3 days, we're like, we were wrong about that one. Like 3 days later, their trade had not printed in the quarterlies, even though they're the homepage, and everyone's just going straight to the perps. So, so it's just like taking extremely explicit customer feedback. Some of this is thinking about like what are products that like variants exist on in sort of other realms or with sort of like things hindering them, and what's sort of like the right way to bring them here. And I think like tokenized products is a giant example. Like these are just huge in a lot of the world, and excited to be working on a lot of those. I think that something like move contracts came from like a pretty different perspective. So these are basically futures that expired how much Bitcoin moves in a day. They're also basically a straddle. And where did those come from? I think they sort of came from like starting from square one and saying like people clearly want volatility products, but it's also pretty clear that the world, at least the crypto world, hasn't thought extremely hard about what the best volatility products are. And they sort of launched the obvious ones, like options, the way normal options are. And even those came about like, it's not obvious that's the best volatility product. And so we just sort of like sat down and said like, what would be like a product with a lot of good properties? And we're like, well, it should be easy to understand and interpret. It should have like a fundamentally important financial significance. And it should be like not fucked up to trade. And we were sort of thinking like what fills that purpose? And like options are not bad. They're a little complicated. They're a little weird to trade sometimes. And what we ultimately decided was like, oh wait, what if we just say the amount Bitcoin moves? That's super easy to understand. It's super intuitive. It's also turns out to be almost exactly volatility, which is sort of the core thing underlying options in the entire volatility space. And so it's just sort of smooth, like, wow, that actually checks both those boxes. We've never seen this thing before, never seen someone do it, but it actually seems to be like exactly what, what people want in multiple ways. And so we just sort of went for it and sort of got positive feedback and iterated on it. And I think a lot of this is sort of like lying on beanbags, like talking about this and being like, all right, what if we try and launch this product? And it's like, oh, we could do this thing. We've all like yell at each other for like 5 minutes, like, that's not going to work. And like, what about this variant? We're like, oh yeah, and eventually sort of ended there. So
I thought Move was a brilliant product. I mean, it distills like, okay, I want to trade volatility. It distills it down to a very simple manifestation of that. And even the name of itself, like even the name, like it's it's called Move. It's like it's how much it moves. It brilliantly simple because like distilling options trading, like when people think options trading, they're thinking like a Black-Scholes model of like numbers all over a whiteboard. But this just makes it simple. It's like, cool. Did it move? Like how much is it going to move? So I think it's a phenomenal product. Great job on that.
I think it's a product we're most proud of because it's not something we just copied from somewhere else, and we think it's gone pretty well. So
that's awesome. And I guess Dan, welcome. Lennix, also welcome. Dan, we're talking about what are your prospective exchanges doing with Bitcoin? I know Kraken has brought on Pierre to be kind of a Bitcoin strategist. Obviously, there's a Bitcoin forward ethos there. Why don't you talk about how Kraken is kind of like innovating with Bitcoin?
That's a great question. I mean, a lot of this I'd have to kind of punt to Pierre because he's been hired to be the point person or the DRI, the direct responsible individual at Kraken, focused solely on how do we integrate with Bitcoin, how do we build better products and services for our users utilizing the Bitcoin network. So I'd have to kind of default to him on a lot of these. It's like if we were to dig in deeper on that, I think at a base level, like we're serving the Bitcoin community by being a venue where you can easily buy and sell Bitcoin. And I think Kraken has had a bit of a deficit on our UX. So that's something that we're doubling down on this year, where I think a lot of other companies do a great job at that. I think that's something that we kind of, during the hustle and bustle during 2017 bubble, we hadn't really captured. And I think that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time focusing on. So not a direct response in terms of like how we're working with Bitcoin, but I know Jesse's like very much a crypto first guy. He's kind of one of the more rebellious type CEOs in the space. And I think for him, he loves to work with something like loves to work with the core protocol and integrate that further into Kraken as long as it provides some sort of benefit to the user. So, I can't really speak to how much Pierre is diving into technologies like Lightning. I know he was tweeting about that a little while ago, but if it solves a problem for our customers, then we're definitely going to be looking at that as a solution. And if that's part of the Bitcoin core protocol, then we're going to look at how that can make the experience better for our users or unlock some sort of functionality or be a solution.
Cool. And Lennix, same question to you. Excited to have you on the show.
Yep. Thank you for having me. So in terms of Bitcoin, our contribution to Bitcoin should be, I think OKEX is always one of the platforms that's trying to make the purchase of Bitcoin as easy as possible. So that's why we trying to extract all the Bitcoin related value by adding a lot more features, by having, for example, instant buy or sell Bitcoin into our platform, and at the same time, OKX is one of the I would say the most one of the exchange have the most product ranges in related to Bitcoin, no matter spot exchange, margin exchanges, and also all kind of derivatives, including a listed option. So I think our contribution to Bitcoin community should be building a pretty good pricing and liquidity value for traders and hedgers to hash the exposure, price the exposure on Bitcoin.
Awesome. Sorry guys, fumbling with OBS here, but so our next segment here is bearish or bullish. So the point here is we're gonna give you a topic, and then you'll tell us if you're bearish or bullish and why. The first here is this concept of decentralized finance. This is kind of a concept that seems a little antithetical to maybe some of the businesses that you guys run. How do you guys feel about it? Let's go with Catherine here.
What I'm bearish or bullish about in the space, or what we're working on?
Sure, the concept of decentralized finance. It's mostly famous on Ethereum, but are you bearish or bullish on this idea?
To be fair, I took a screenshot of us all and was trying to tweet that to help more people show up to this event. So apologies for that shamelessness. On DeFi, I think it's fascinating. So there's so many ways where you can get into crypto that we're building pockets that attract certain types of investor appetite. So you think about, someone trying to time the highs and lows of the market and essentially like scalp their way for alpha is going to be a very different type of user than someone that's going to be enjoying a yield producing product. It's going to be something like long and they'll hold their position and keep it there for longer, and being returned reward for having that Bitcoin loaned out. And so I think that if we are able to provide alternatives for people to choose from, it's even better for the space, because one size doesn't fit all in anything that we do. And that's really important for us to think about when we're building out a brand new industry. If we custom fit this to model after an industry that we've already seen, we're not going to be able to expand the pie and let more people partake in what can essentially be their financial future. So I'm a big component of adding new tools like that. We're still in the works on being able to provide those. So I won't talk about staking because that's not on Bitcoin. So we'll kind of keep you guys updated, but I always love advice and hearing from their users on what they really want to be doing with their Bitcoin. So good point.
All right, let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's go to Alex. How do you feel about this concept of DeFi?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on how you define DeFi. I think I think there are caveats in my answer, and it is nuanced. I do think decentralizing some certain uses, some certain like financial use cases is interesting, but I think largely finance is built around trust and property rights. And then normally finance is about funding enterprises and contractual obligations that are enforced by social constructs and social contracts. And I don't think you can decentralize that, frankly. I think it's going to remain niche compared to large, like mainstream finance.
Totally makes sense. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these DeFi products are looking at like over collateralized lending, which I'm not sure like how big of a pain point that's solving. I mean, at the end of the day, your protocol or your product has to solve a problem for your customer. And a lot of centralized solutions, even though they have the trade-off of having to trust them, solves that problem for like 99% of use cases. So there is like a very small sliver of use cases that can be solved by DeFi in a way where you've traded off usability and XYZ other factor for that decentralization factor. But even in those circumstances, like how DeFi are these DeFi products? Like we often see that there are all sorts of elements of centralization where people can reverse transactions or freeze funds or something like that. So, I really don't think there's, in the true spectrum of like what is a DeFi product, like totally decentralized finance, I'm not even sure how many would qualify as that. and they usually come at extreme trade-offs of usability and other factors to solve a problem that only exists for like a pretty niche amount of people. And I think to Alex's point, like this is all based on trust. And for example, like let's say we put wrappers around ownership of real world items like cars and houses, and we put a wrapper around that and we put that on a blockchain. Cool. Well, if I lose my private key to my house, I'm still fucking sleeping in my house. Like I'm not just gonna like abandon it. And also like that falls back onto the local, the local monopoly on violence, which is my state, to enforce those property rights. So you can add a wrapper all you want around that, but it doesn't really change the situation. It's sort of like an unnecessary wrapper around an existing system of rules and regulations around who owns what or property rights. So yeah, TLDR, not super bullish on it, but I think we could all have guessed that before I went into that that conversation.
You said something that reminds me of I don't remember who said the quote, but it was they weren't bullish on the tokenized real estate because if someone steals your wallet, then they have all your money and they have your house. That was just a really funny line. Lennix, what do you think?
Yeah, as much as I love the concept of having a unified, one single decentralized global marketplace. Without any centralized server, centralized government body and regulatory body, but I'm a little bit. I love the concept. Obviously, I really wish that would be happening eventually in the long run. But I still a little bit skeptic in the short term visions on DeFi because a lot of DeFi protocol is actually relies on a price feed. Or what we call Oracle from a centralized generated marketplace, it's really difficult for a fairly traded price or fair value to be generated natively on blockchain layer, blockchain protocol. So most of the time that you need to rely on Oracle that's grabbing market data feed from maybe some exchange like Coinbase or KX. So that's also indicate that DeFi need to live side by side with a centralized structure, regular structure. So the vision of having just purely trust-led marketplace might not be happening very soon, but the vision is great. We should love it. We should embrace and start building and keep building.
Absolutely, absolutely.
As you say, Surf have, and I want to echo a lot of things that were said. Like there's some serious issues with a lot of the DeFi projects as they exist now, and even with like there's sort of serious questions to resolve the concept of it. One which Lennix and others brought up, unless the question you're trying to answer is how many tokens are at this ETH address. If you're trying to answer like any other question, it's not on the blockchain, and you gotta have some Oracle type thing, and that's your centralization, and it's sort of like a really fundamental thing that's hard to solve. And I think there's also a flip side to this, though, which is people think of DeFi as security, and there are ways in which it is, but there are ways in which it's the opposite. And you can look at the DeFi hacks or at the DeFi liquidity meltdowns as examples of like, and I think like as someone who's running an exchange, and I think a lot of you can probably empathize with this, like when you tell us like you're not allowed to change your product ever again, we're sort of like our customers are fucked. Like, we like literally can never improve or fix anything again. Like that's like not going to make it more secure. We see some security threat and our hands are tied. And you've seen this a lot. Like there's been a lot of DeFi hacks, and there have been a lot of liquidity failures, and it's just sort of like coming from like a combination of clunkiness and like it's really hard to build something that's going to survive the trustlessness. On the flip side of that, I think there are some super cool things there. I spent the last day just totally nerding out about Compound, just because it was sort of big and in the news, and we were thinking about listing it, which we just did. And I think there are some really cool things it does. First, I just think it's well built. Like the UI is cool. I also think that the C token are just like a really cool idea. It's like tokenized interest, and done in sort of a really sleek way. And so I think there's like a lot of cool things about that. And I think some of what this gets back to is that to build, there's always going to be this issue with DeFi of like CeFi seeping in. in the cracks whenever you need to get data in there. But some of this can be mitigated by just doing an extremely good job of building it, like really, 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 really good. And again, you can't change it or some parts of it once you build it, so it better be damn good the first time. But you know, a lot of these things are not quite unsolvable. It's just like really unforgiving. And we've seen project after project after project not hit that extremely high bar of like built well enough to thrive in the DeFi environment. And I think even most of the biggest projects right now clearly don't. And anyone who's interacted with them is like, all right, Tether can be a pain in the ass. Boy, is it easier than DAI. Like, you know, I'm not saying that Tether is the easiest stablecoin to create and redeem in the world, but DAI you can't even redeem. Like, it's not even like hard. It's just like, it's not a function you can do unless you were the one who created it. What the hell's going on? You know, and so I think that like, you know, there's just a super, super high bar for a DeFi product to do well. And I think that like, this space has had way too much emphasis on like rolling out kind of a cool new thing and not nearly enough emphasis on doing like an unbelievably good job and thinking really hard about like exactly what functions your thing is trying to have and solve and what it needs.
Anyone else have an opinion? Nope. All right, next topic. Lightning for exchanges. So I think on this one, we can start off with Alex, which is the only exchange to my knowledge that actually has Lightning right now.
I think Bitfinex also has Lightning.
Sorry, I meant on this panel.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty bullish. I think there's a long way to go, certainly, though. You know, we've learned a lot running Lightning in production. It's certainly more complicated than Layer 1 because it's an interactive protocol. That said, it is a pretty nice user experience, and I think it's going to continue to improve once invoices we can get rid of invoices and just kind of make it much less interactive. I do think that there's a future a few years from now where you're just sending, you know, money to your exchange account really quickly over Lightning for really cheap. I'm pretty bullish.
Anyone else with a similar sentiment, or the opposite?
I think B2B is an interesting use case. You know, settlement, like using Lightning for like faster settlement between different exchange venues would be interesting. Again, Pierre is working on a lot of this stuff for us, so this is just more of me talking from a personal level in terms of how I think it'd be interesting. You know, opening up Lightning channels with big traders on your exchange, or like, you know, really high volume traders might make sense to help them move funds faster and take advantage of like arbitrage or other opportunities. I think stuff like that's really cool. Which may just be like you opening up channels with them. It may not even be something where like it's not really connected to the rest of the Lightning network. It's just channels opening between you and them. Stuff like that I think has like a lot of applicability today and solves a problem, which is like speed of moving funds between different venues. But I'm not like as much of a fan as I am of this technology. I still think like the UX for like retail payments or like retail merchant adoption is you know, very, very far away.
Catherine, do you have any thoughts on Lightning? Is Lightning coming to Binance?
Well, I think I've got to have a conversation with Alex. I'm so curious as to like how his users have enjoyed it. But the biggest concern for me was the pace at which it is right now is not seamless enough that we could roll it out to the range of which we want to be welcoming onto our platform. So providing something that's kind of tricky, nuanced, you have to be like, you know, a little bit more savvy into using it. It still pretty much alienates folks. And I really just want to be avoiding that kind of nature of where we introduce something that only is catering towards a certain demographic. So we're going to hold off and kind of keep doing our due diligence on how we can improve the UX and make it feel really seamless, so it's not even a burden on our users.
Are there other layer 2s that you think are coming close to that bar? Because it seems as though, in general, people have just accepted how blockchains work and accepted that UX and like it. Are you seeing anyone else that's like innovating in the layer 2 space that is, you know, that you'd even consider?
So I have kind of a weird take on it. First of all, I just want to echo what others have said. Like, I think it's potentially cool as a B2B thing, so that like transfers between exchanges are faster. I don't see a ton of clamoring for it on the like user side. I think they're more like, could you implement it with this other exchange so that the transaction is faster? One thing which I think is worth noting is like right now when you talk about layer 2, I mean, there's sort of a lot of things it could eventually mean, but if you ask right now, what does it mean? It means my transfers from one exchange to another are fast. Like that's like 90% of what people mean. And or can handle higher throughput or something like that. And yeah, you can sort of B2B this. But you can also use a chain which is sort of faster for some purposes. And I think that something that we're seeing increasingly is people being sensitive to what chains they're using to move assets around, especially something like Tether. It's on a lot of chains. And over time, you've just seen migration to faster and faster and faster chains. That's like 80% of what explains which chain is sort of popular. It's like, I don't know, something that's faster than yesterday. And I don't want to say that faster chains are always better. There's often a trade-off here. And often there's a trade-off with centralization, where how'd you get faster? Kind of the less decentralized you are, the faster you can be, is the truth with chains. But for some purposes, like transfers between exchanges, that's sort of what you want. Like, you're not really worried about like that. That's not sort of where your big security worries are, or your big long-term governance worries are. That really is just like transaction fees and speed. And as opposed to smart contracts, which are totally governance oriented. And so transfers between exchanges, I think, are really ripe for, it's just like a really ripe place for chains which are fast to thrive. And we've seen that happening. And I think they're filling the role that people thought layer 2 would fill. It's just like layer 1, but faster.
So
yeah,
what?
Clear utility. Like it becomes every sense of the word utility of just you being able to move things faster up to another exchange. So it's kind of like this.
I was gonna say let's get Lennix involved there, and then I have a follow-up question for the group.
Yeah, I agree with Sam that the faster network should be able to get more traction that maybe other token maybe have an edge on moving it into the Bitcoin network. Lightning is obviously one of the more promising, at least on papers, on the layer 2 solution on Bitcoin. Obviously, OKEX is going to implement Lightning as well, as long as it is gathering proven. So I think right now, obviously, we see a lot of trend or a lot of demand for traders that, especially most exchange right now, are having derivative or highly leveraged products. The need of transacting faster between exchanges is actually getting more intense than before. So I think might be a layer networks one of the solutions that we see so far.
So I'm glad that you brought up the Liquid network, because what Sam described to me, I was like, well, that sounds like exactly what Liquid is. It's a centralized, fast blockchain that's good for issuing tokens, Tether, and Bitcoin. Do you guys see a fit in that? It seems like Liquid is pretty polarizing amongst the Bitcoin community.
I mean, one thing, I not to say anything like super bad about it, but I think one struggle it might be running into is trying to justify why it's better than Ripple or Tron or EOS. And it's sort of a weird thing. Like, I don't think it's sort of the comparison they were thinking of when they made it necessarily. But there are just layer 1 chains which are like extremely fast and cheap. And a lot of people don't like their governance structures, and I totally get that. But that's sort of not what Liquid is about either. And so when you look at like Tether, I think it's sort of is already getting to the point where like the dominant factor in transferring between exchanges is the first exchange releasing the withdrawal, not the blockchain time, if you do it on the right chain.
Plus one that with it's like Tether is very much centralized, but it's sort of a game of hot potato, and you just hope that like Tether there's not a huge regulatory enforcement going on while you're moving funds with Tether. But until that happens, which it hasn't happened really, then you're fine. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that there's a trade-off between decentralization and speed and XYZ other function. Liquid, I don't think it's like that polarizing. I mean, they're doing trade-offs of decentralization to enable more functionality, and it's a side chain. But when transacting across a block space, it's not just the transaction fee. You're actually paying two other fees as well, which is the volatility fee. So let's just say you're using a block space and you're transacting across a block space just for the pure utility of moving value. You still have the volatility fee, which is between when you purchased the coin and when the coin was accepted and delivered at the other venue, or whichever counterparty that you're delivering the coins to. And then two, you've got trading fees. So you've got like exchange fees on both sides. So you took dollars or yen or euro, and you bought, let's just say BTC for easy math. Well, at a minimum, like unless you're a high volume trader, you're going to pay at least like 10 to 20 bips. And that's if you did the maker fee. That's if you did like a maker fee versus a taker. So you got 20 bips plus the volatility bips plus the on-chain fee. So like transacting across a block space is actually pretty expensive unless you're using a stable coin.
I think, my take on things is, at least on the liquid side of things, is that it's very interesting from a technical perspective. I think one of the biggest challenges it has to adoption is just the confusion that it would bring to users. Like there's Bitcoin and liquid Bitcoin, and trying to explain that to people, especially given the fact that Bitcoin Cash has already been enough of a nightmare for a lot of exchanges, and trying to explain the difference between those two things. Adding one more Bitcoin asset in the operational overhead of customer service, having to explain that to people, I think that's actually probably one of the biggest challenges.
So far, the sentiment is shitcoin chains over liquid. Lennix or Catherine, do you guys have opinions you want to voice on liquid?
Yeah, I think aside from the government's related complaints or issues on liquid, and one more point I would like to add that might be on liquid should be it's faster, it's more efficient, it's cheaper in terms of trade network commissions, but it's also a drop of mining probability if the liquid becoming really widespread in terms of adoption, because I think miners will experience a big drop in revenue in terms of transaction fees, because right now after Bitcoin halving and expecting halving, the block reward will be expected to be lower. So Bitcoin will experience drop in revenue, and that might jeopardize whether the Bitcoin reward will be sufficient to protect the network.
All right, so liquid could compromise Bitcoin security. Brandon, do you have a question?
Yeah. We just got a question on our YouTube that I wanted to throw out to you guys. We have John Michael who's asking, what are the panel's thoughts on exchanges straight up shutting down when rapid moves of 5+% occurs? Is it immature infrastructure, or are the exchanges doing something to manipulate?
We haven't shut down in any volatile days yet, but we're only 9 months old.
Yeah, so there's this idea of circuit breakers in the traditional financial world, and that's typically because there's a single venue in which trading happens. But in crypto, we've got all these different venues and prices being discovered across all these different venues. So shutting down on one venue doesn't really make much sense because the price is being discovered everywhere else. And so you're sort of penalizing the traders trading on your venue if you had a circuit breaker installed. There's also an issue though too, because it's really hard to move funds back and forth between venues due to the settlement time. So that's what we saw with BitMEX, where BitMEX, the auto liquidation engine, was winding down and down and down, and people weren't able to, traders weren't able to pull in funds to take advantage of that, to where it led to that auto liquidation sort of spiral effect. So pros and cons to it, but it's almost impossible to implement in crypto.
And I'll definitely say that, at the very least, I think that the vast majority of them are not are accidental. I mean, among other things, I think it's almost always bad for the exchange when this happens. this is actually something that shocked me when I started running Exchange, was how strong this feedback was. I didn't think people were going to like it if we had downtime. The thing I didn't anticipate was like the amount of hate mail that you get for like 30 seconds of slow UI, and the amount of like millions of dollars of customer funds that somehow, mysteriously work. Like it's, the complaints we get add up to like an absurd number of amount of losses, like doesn't correspond to anything going on. People feel really, really strongly in crypto that they should never go down. And there's like nothing, there's almost nothing I could imagine happening that would make me think that like FTX going down would be like a good outcome. Not nothing, but like it seems really bad. I don't know that this is like always true, but I at least think it's like almost always true. And like I think probably some people here are cringing even thinking about like what happens when there's any downtime.
Yeah, I mean, we had scheduled downtime. We had to give 3 days notice in advance to communicate to our users. We gave them like practically a countdown that was like, and in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you'll be, we're cleaning up, all the things that we need to do to make sure that our systems are fast and ready. And then, within 48 hours after us opening back up the platform, we saw one of the most volatile days, and our entire system supported all of our users, and we had our all-time high day of trading. And to us, I mean, that delivering the access to everyone without having to be the gatekeeper is super important. There've been gatekeepers my entire life that have kept me out of accessing where I want to be and what I want to do in my life. And so now our opportunity is to really lower those barriers to entry, give people the control that they really deserve into accessing these markets. So that's really my stance on it. I certainly think that, circuit breakers from a larger sense of where they're used on, S&P, it's helpful for market manipulation. There's certainly things from a traditional sense that circuit breakers are useful for, but in our role as a venue, as a marketplace, like the farmer's market doesn't shut down when zucchini's on sale. So our doors are open for all our users.
One caveat I might add is that I think there's something to be said for extremely brief circuit breakers. The sort of like 10-second type circuit breakers, which are just meant to be like, do you have a bot that's going haywire that you really should have turned off? Like, we're just going to make you choose to reconnect it in case this is an accident. But like, if you actually mean to, trades can be down for like a minuscule amount of time, so it won't impact you. And I do think that during flash crashes in traditional financial markets, these things can sometimes be helpful. Just in sort of like giving everyone a brief reset button to see if they really mean to be doing what they're doing. And if they are, yeah, market's going to crash if everyone's selling. But like, at least make sure it was intentional.
Sam, that reminds me of Netflix. If you're binge watching a show and it reminds you, like, are you still there? Is that you? Are you still watching this? And you're like, of course I am. I'm on hour 12. Like, it's super important. Like, that's kind of what that, just a quick, a love check. Or,
I had no idea that was a feature.
Is your buck? Well, you clearly not binge watched Tiger King. Fair enough.
Dude, Tiger King was so last month, Catherine. Come on.
I am waiting for my next version of it.
How about Waco now?
Oh yeah, all right.
Waco's a good one.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Okay, that's what the dudes are watching. I've got to go watch it.
Do we want to stay on circuit breakers and flash crashes, or should we move on to a spicier topic?
TV shows are kind of fun. I mean, what's everyone watching? Let's get out of crypto for a second.
I've done all the ESPNs and was really pleased with the last Maguire and Sammy Sosa one. That was pretty wild. So,
by the way,
anyone keeps up on sports.
Fun fact: Catherine's favorite bar in the city is the Olympic Club, right?
Nope.
I'm just messing. Every time the city has been at the Olympic Club, I think out of circumstance.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those are the 2 times I've gone out and drank.
Yeah.
So I was like really confused.
I heard you say drink.
A favorite watering hole.
I'm very much
I heard you
joking.
say drink.
It was a happy hour after all, right?
Oh.
I know. There was one comment on Twitter that said, everyone looks really sober. And I was like, yeah, I'm drinking emergency. But what's our spicier topic?
Well, so there's a few exchanges here that are only in America, and there's a few exchanges that exclusively don't serve Americans. So I'm kind of curious, is America worth it? Because there is a toll to doing business here, at least when it comes to permissionless eCash. And I'm curious if people feel bullish or bearish on the American market. I would actually like to start with Sam because you just opened up in the U.S. and you're kind of operating two sides. I know, we can jump to Binance after, but why don't you take this one, Sam?
Yeah, no, I think the thing I feel most strongly is understand what you're doing and think it through. And that the big fuck up, person after person has done this. You try and launch like shitcoin futures exchange in the United States, and it's just like, no, that you can't do that. And like 6 years later, their business still hasn't opened to customers because you can't do that. And it's just like, what were you thinking launching that business in that country? And on the flip side, you see people who are like, I have a Bitcoin to USD order book, and I would like to service the Asian region. And you're sort of like, I don't know, like Binance grew beyond that sort of product description like 2.5 years ago. Like you've got like 7 entrenched competitors with billions of dollars of volume that have all these wacky derivatives and like so much full featured a platform. And you got your Bitcoin USD order book. Like that's what's your plan exactly? But you look a lot at the U.S. exchange, you're like, yeah, they got a Bitcoin USD order book and it fucking works. I'm going to use that. And so I think like the big thing here is like understand your target audience, understand your business, and make sure you're opening the right business in the right place. And don't open the right business in the wrong place. That can absolutely kill it. And we've seen, Kraken, obviously, Coinbase, be fantastically successful in the United States. We've seen Binance, OKEX, Huobi, and others be fantastically successful outside the United States. And just make sure you put the right thing in the right place. And speaking from our perspective, FTX and FTX US, they're different platforms. Like they're very different. FTX US, it has like 10 markets, and they're all spot markets. And like the cool thing it has is some users can margin trade, and that's what like a sort of sexy thing is in the United States as a product. And like FTX on the other hand is like 101x leverage on Tomo chain, buy quarterly futures, sure, why not? And move contracts and this stuff, and it's sort of like it's just a very, very differently designed product for a very differently designed space.
Okay, let's go to Catherine next. Is the U.S. worth it? Binance U.S.
You hit that nail on the head there, Sam. You've got to know what markets you're going into. I spent my entire life in different markets than the United States, knowing the differences between that I grew up in and where the rest of the world was trading and how the rest of the world was trading. And so coming back to the United States, I am very bullish on it. We've got to cater to a US user. We've got to deliver the markets that they actually want to make sure that they do not fall behind in global innovation in this space. Does that mean it's going to be the same innovation that takes place in all over the rest of the world? No, it's going to have its own flavor. It's going to have its own way of serving users and delivering the technology to people's homes. And so we're crafting it in a way that really suits our users. We understand that there's still such a small percentage of Americans that actually know and use crypto. You see a good portion of Americans actually adopting GBTC and other things that they've, fundamentally want to get involved on the momentum, but they aren't even understanding the technology or using many of the benefits. Kind of like why Lightning adoption isn't yet there, because that's like the next chapter that they haven't even broken into. So we're here to stay. We're growing. It's great. Education is a huge component when we come into a new market. We've got a baseline, figure out where people are perceiving crypto to be. I think we've grown up out of the crypto is taboo. We've adopted probably courtesy of the lockdown, trading markets, access to markets, investing on your own is a great way to sustain your own well-being. Maybe not well-being, but your capital and wealth growth. Those components, we've got to package them in a different way, as Sam mentioned. Binance US, our app looks a little different than Binance.com's. The underlying technology, the matching engine, and the wallet infrastructure, that can all have a global standard that is super high. And we're not going to lower that bar just because the audience that we serve wants a different type of product. So delivering the greatest technology to users in a form that they want to digest is really important.
So, is that what American users want? Because I think a lot of American users VPN into BitMEX and VPN into a lot of other exchanges because they're just not allowed to. So,
I think you talk to a really niche market of American users, and you haven't expanded beyond that. Is every single woman that you talk to VPNing into BitMEX? That's 51% of the purchasing population. Think about it.
I mean,
I think maybe part of what's going on here is that there's a distinction between like the Americans who are extremely involved in the crypto derivative scene, which is like sort of very much fits one description, and there's like Americans as a whole who are most of whom are not involved in crypto at all, for a different population. And you know, I suspect that like Coley's thinking a lot about the like possible user base, you know, giant user base growth and adoption growth in the United States off of sort of new users. And you're probably thinking more of like, you know, the sort of frequent posters on crypto Twitter.
Yeah. We're not as much trying to chase around the same, you know, the same piece of string. It's a much bigger world out there that we can use for adoption and making it actually work for people's lives. So we think a little bit bigger, but pardon me.
I guess it was a bad example, but yeah, go for it, Alex.
Oh yeah, so we're US only. We're actually kind of still baby US only. We're only in like 19 states, and we're doing putting in the work to roll out across the US. You know, the US is its own beast, and when it comes to you know, running a money services business, and so I do think, you know, separating the businesses makes a lot of sense. I mean, really the benefit of being outside of the US is escaping the SEC and the CFTC and being able to offer these, you know, more exotic trading instruments that are can make you a lot of money, and that the US just doesn't allow. But you know, we're actually not an exchange. We're like a brokerage. And to Catherine's point, and Catherine, I completely agree. I would go even further to say most people don't even know what an exchange is, honestly, or how it works. Like, I mean, the vast majority of people in the world have no idea what an order book is, or how prices get made, right? And they just know that if they see a price and they buy something, right? And so that's kind of the level we're trying to provide to people, is just the simplicity of not even having to understand financial markets. Bitcoin is already intimidating enough for people, and you know, in the U.S., you kind of have to do it a certain way. You have to follow the rules to integrate with the banking systems to be able to offer the competitive prices, to be able to, you know, process ACH payments and debit from their bank accounts. And so, you know, for a business like ours, you know, we really don't have a choice. You know, we have to focus on the U.S. first and foremost, and international expansion is a ways down the road.
Yeah, it's definitely funny. Like, a lot of us assume that people know what an order book is, but I remember in 2012 when I wired money to Mt. Gox through, I think I had to send it to Dwolla first, and then Dwolla to Gox. And I remember seeing an order book, and I'm like, what the fuck is this thing? I'm like, I don't know what bid and ask orders are. I just want some Bitcoin. And so I think, you know, seeing companies abstract away, like, okay, I'll deliver a price to you, and this price is good for X seconds. Do you want to buy it or not? Or do you want to sell it or not? I think, you know, we're seeing, it's funny to see how, like, whenever, both working in crypto and at Uber, like when I first got into both, like, you assume that things happen really, really quickly. Like in Bitcoin in 2013, we felt that, oh, we were going to like overthrow the banking system. Everyone was going to come to realize the value of Bitcoin. But that didn't happen. You know, it takes time to change people's mental models and help them understand new interfaces. Actually, is like, you have this enormous amount of friction and historical legacy sort of mindset that you have to overcome. So even the idea of order books, I agree, is somewhat of a foreign topic, and people just want to, they make up their mind about buying Bitcoin, and they just want to go buy it. They don't want to think about a limit versus a maker versus taker order. They just want to buy Bitcoin.
But we also think that you should be able to have kind of a graduating scale. So, you know, dumbing it down and kind of pretending that an extremely complex global technology is as easy as, you know, buying an Apple is dubious to some extent. So one of the things that I really feel strongly about, partially because it reflects a lot of how I had to grow up in learning the different financial asset classes and components, is giving people that choice to say, you know, buying crypto is really easy and simple, and we can make that experience seem painless, and it recurs and it does it for you, and it's automated and it's fantastic. You don't have to think about it. But if you do want to learn how to, set your stop losses, understand your limit orders, dig into the technicals, or think about crypto and not just I want to be on that train, but like I want to pick, which car I'm on and jump back and forth to find the fastest way to travel. We want to give you those options. So that to me is something that it was extremely freeing the moment I began to learn the jargon and speak it and practice it, and it opened up my world to being able to be in different circles and understand things. But I'll never forget the person that never understood it. And so there is some, ignorance is bliss, and we can make it a beautiful, seamless UX that takes all that pain out of it. But I also really want to have the education and the framework in place that lets people grow into understanding how the rest of the world is trading.
I think Robinhood does a good job of that. I don't know if you guys have ever, does anyone here have the Robinhood product? I think it is a brilliant, I think, middle ground between those, between like, my kind of dummy version of having access to these financial markets and the more sophisticated, having that granular level of access of being able to buy and sell options and understand and be able to granularly target a certain sort of like trading behaviors.
Yeah, but you can't take your coins off. So like, what?
I'm talking more from a UX UI perspective. I agree. Like Robinhood with like
freedom of choice.
Well, with equities, you can't really go hold. You can't have self custody over equities. So I feel like Robinhood does a great job of that UI allowing like very new individuals being able to help them understand what they're getting into, but then having that deep functionality to where they can go do much more exotic sort of instruments.
I actually agree with you, Dan.
So,
if that means anything.
So I've got a question, CK, for everybody, and maybe this is a good question, maybe this is a bad question, but if we're going to peel back for a second and we're going to look in the next 10 years, way down the road, does an exchange look like an exchange does today, or is there some sort of growth strategy where an exchange isn't just a place to go buy and sell Bitcoin, but you do a lot more with it? Is there that kind of growth strategy with you guys? And if so, kind of what does that look like?
So, and one thing I would say is, like, if you look at crypto exchanges, they do way more than financial exchanges do right now. Like already they've like massively outpaced in scope the maximum growth strategy of most normal exchanges. Like exchanges in crypto aren't just a matching engine. They're a matching engine, a risk engine, a liquidation engine, a holding assets engine, a deposit and withdrawal engine, a product management engine, a product development engine, a PR engine, a marketing engine, a customer relations engine, customer service engine. Like these things are all just like different businesses on Wall Street. Like you got the ETF makers, the exchanges, you got the clearing firms, and sort of like all get meshed into one, or maybe two or something in crypto. So already it's a pretty big scope, and the scope might grow more, but I think more likely growth would come in the space growing and the scope of those scopes growing, and sort of the things you can do with each of those growing more so than like, extending into even more areas of the crypto vertical.
Yeah, we also see just in general, a lot of the components that were making our lives easier or expanding our ability to socialize with folks have all migrated into becoming their own payment or bank as well. So I think there's an equal amounts of crypto wanting to become more mainstream, more acceptable, and others accepting that they're going to need to integrate more with the payment system as well. So where we can merge those worlds and make it pretty seamless, we're either going to look like a blender of, TikTok and Capital One, or something that actually will suit our lives and sustain society a little bit better.
So the way we approach things is actually a little bit different. Kind of the whole hypothesis behind our company is that trading will be a niche thing for more sophisticated people, and Bitcoin is going to continue to grow in its role as a money medium of exchange and store of value around the world. And we're basically building a bank around this new type of money, not really an exchange. I mean, the brokerage service we offer to buy and sell is the key on ramp to this new financial system. But we're really building what look like banking services. We're not a bank, in the official sense. We don't have a charter or anything like that. But That's the hypothesis behind our company, is that Bitcoin is going to be much more than just what it is today.
Like
it's only 10 years old. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of like Hal Finney's idea behind like Bitcoin banks. Like exchanges are like the first iteration of Bitcoin banks, where we see BlockFi and these other companies doing lending and borrowing, and same with Binance. And I think this is like the kind of like, we started in each individual sort of segment, like, okay, we're going to do buying and selling really well. We're going to do lending and borrowing really well, but now they're all kind of coming together to where people want a full stack solution where they can buy and sell crypto assets. They can lend and borrow crypto assets, or borrow against crypto assets using them as collateral and getting like USD or other sort of stablecoin value from that. So I really see this as like the rebundling of different banking services into these Bitcoin banks or these crypto banks.
Yeah, I think the boundary of exchange is right now seemingly is like unlimited, but I think eventually the space got to be have some really specialized company or startup that can able to take over one small specialized area.
Easiest thing is we just listen to what our users want. We ask them every day. I think people are changing in terms of what they prioritize. If someone were to launch come and pitch to me a shoe company, I'd have to say, well, I haven't been wearing them for the last 3 months, so they're not really necessary for me. So, I think we're going to see a continuation of how society globally is going to be changed, impacted certainly from these last 3 months, 4 months, and going forward. And so we're going to see a shift of business. We're going to see a shift of what people really want. It's not as predictable as the folks that were putting strategy packages together 6 months ago. And so I think that's really key to stay nimble and be able to build something that people really want.
So I guess on this, we're transitioning over to topics. The first topics is like, what are exchanges' biggest challenges right now? I can imagine that regulation is a big challenge. I'm curious if anyone thinks that something else is a bigger challenge than dealing with regulations.
Today I'm burdened by imposter accounts on Twitter. That's annoying. That's annoying
Those
me.
are so
That's
annoying.
annoying me. I'm like, I really genuinely reach out to a lot of my customers, but now I'm having to say like, no, I don't directly reach out to you, but you can always reach out to me, because I'm not going to, it just frustrates me that people are wanting to learn, wanting to get involved, and then getting, scammed into something that I'm like, look, there was grammar errors. I'm a stickler for that. Like, come on.
The only saving grace is when imposter me's try to scam me, because I post in our own Telegram channel and don't realize that's not going to work.
I got called out in our Telegram channel. They were like, the CEO is trying to be a scammer. This is such a scam. And I was like, sir, I'm literally right here, like bending over backwards. It's 1 a.m. I'm here to help. Give me your ticket number. I respond to all the tickets. Like, it's pretty it's pretty scary when you're trying to build a world where trust is the medium that we're going to be working with, and we can't get a factual fact check.
Twitter fact checks.
For us.
Yeah, maybe that should show up when someone messages it. But
oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think for us, regulatory stuff is the biggest blocker, the biggest artificial blocker, in the sense that there's a market and we have demand in these markets, and we are not allowed to operate, and we're working through that. But I do think that there's an even bigger challenge, and I think still the perception of Bitcoin, educating people about Bitcoin, and making it go more mainstream is really the biggest blocker. I think that there's just a lot of work left to do to make the Bitcoin experience, to take the Bitcoin experience where it needs to be. And I think a lot of that work is education. I think a lot of that work is people who deeply care about Bitcoin kind of stepping up to kind of carry the torch forward and and put themselves out there in circles outside of Bitcoin superfans.
It's a big world.
yeah, just putting yourself in other people's shoes and really kind of going and talking to people who don't live and breathe this stuff every day.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been getting user bases. Like I definitely, FTX is way at one extreme of this. Like I sort of looking through some of our numbers recently, I think like, our like ratio of volume to users is like absurd compared to most exchanges. And we've sort of always been in the place where we have all these features we're sort of brimming to add. And sort of like the thing that's always been frustrating is like, why isn't everyone here yet? And obviously some people are, and we're super excited for that. And we're really excited about how fast you grow, but we're always like, why is there anyone who isn't here yet? And we're like, oh, well, we've only been here a year. A lot of people like only actually think about this once every few years. There are a lot of other people. And so like for us, I think like, the central challenge has, there have been a lot of really important parts. I think the product is the most important part, but it's also the part that I think we're best at and sort of best positioned to be best at. And I think like growing the user base is something that we're sort of starting from square one on.
A user acquisition in crypto is like extremely difficult because you have these drought versus monsoon sort of seasons where nothing happens and then all of a sudden the price increases across a multitude of different crypto assets. That price becomes the viral loop that pulls in more users. They buy in anticipation of the value increasing, and it builds this cycle. And I've been through 3 so far, early 13, late 13, and 17. And I think what our job here as in terms of a marketing function at exchanges is you have to go build wider doors. You have to build more efficient processes to take someone who walks in the door to get them to different areas they want to go trade in. So it's making wider doors. It's making easier, so easier on and off ramps, easier understandability, getting them to that make magic moment or that aha moment in the product, which is likely, purchasing crypto for the first time. So getting them to that moment, the most efficient, least friction way possible is likely to be our main objective in terms of onboarding. But, if you look at like the full growth funnel, it's on the top of the funnel where you go around the awareness, and that awareness turns into views on your website. How do you cast that really wide net to take advantage of all these people starting to perform queries on Google over like, what is Bitcoin? How do I buy Bitcoin? How do I buy Ethereum, etc.? There's not a lot we can do to stimulate demand. Like, for example, when I worked at Uber, we would launch like a new feature. So if we had UberX and then we launched Uber Pool might unlock incremental demand. Whereas most exchanges in the space now, we can't launch a new feature that's going to bring around a 10x level of adoption. We can simply build bigger doors and build a better way to get people in, but it's really hard for us to actually go stimulate demand. It's largely driven by the FOMO, market cycle of a bull run, which means that you just have to prepare everything in place for that moment happening versus going out and stimulating demand through new features and services, or through a brilliant marketing campaign or something like that.
And sometimes it's organic. I mean, William Shatner just said hello to me yesterday, and that was the coolest thing that's happened to me in 2020. So, sometimes there's a lot of curiosity out there, and I think we've just got to be approachable. We've got to let them know that, none of us have all the answers in the world. If you do, please definitely DM me. But we're here to work together and figure out the best path forward. There's kind of still a huge approachability gap that happens with Bitcoin. And I think that's something we can all work better at. There's that race of when did you start learning about Bitcoin? When did you get in? Are you worthy enough? Am I late? Is the train already gone and I'm too far behind? And the answer is if I said that, I joined Morgan Stanley and they were celebrating their 75th anniversary. I was definitely late to the trade then if I needed to get in there in the first 2 years of the bank being operating. So we've just got to realize that time cycle, people all will come into their own when Bitcoin works for them. And we've got to make sure that we're doing that. We're making crypto really work for people.
So you guys hit on kind of this, monsoon versus dry season. It feels kind of like we're starting to see some raindrops, maybe macro events and just kind of the way that Bitcoin cycle generally goes. What are your guys' thoughts kind of on that macro environment and, things you're keeping your eyes on, or some leading indicators that kind of you're watching out for?
I can speak to this anecdotally. We're seeing, I have a lot of conversations with clients, and I have a lot of conversations with our older clients, and we've seen a steady stream of older people buying up Bitcoin because it's now normalized in their minds. We kind of call them, we call them Bitcoin boomers, but we have a lot of people who I talk to a lot of people, they both older men and women who are putting a significant chunk of their wealth into Bitcoin because they see the government printing all this money. And I think it's very fascinating that this narrative is going mainstream. Now, as to like what the actual macroeconomic realities are, I think it's so complex that it'd be foolish for me to make predictions there. Are we going to see inflation or deflation? I don't know. But I do know that I'm seeing this, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'll second that. Having really brought a lot of awareness to the space, as well as the influx of a stimulus that was going directly into the dollar supply. So combined with that and some good days above 10K, we've seen a real pickup in people wanting to get involved that were new to the space, as well as people reconsidering where they were actually putting their money. So I think it's really important for people to not be passive about their experience in Bitcoin and kind of have an active role in it, understanding why they're in it, what platforms they're using to be involved in it, what are the features that they really want out of it, rather than just kind of sit back and hope it goes well. You've got to really, take an active role in anything you do if you want it to see it grow.
One thing I think I'll say is that I think things feel a little bit hopeful in crypto, but I think some of that's that the standard for right now is incredibly low in the world. The standard for your industry seems hopeful is it's not in tatters, and crypto's actually doing fine. It's doing, if anything, maybe even better than it was before COVID. I don't know. I mean, it's not clear if it's better or worse. I don't think it's unprecedented levels of growth that we're seeing. It's definitely not. This is not even the busiest time in the last 2 months. But it's fine. I think it's a slightly more bullish than average time. But I think you compare that to the rest of the world where it's you're not allowed to leave your house. That's how things are now. And if you had a small business brick and mortar store, it's just gone. In comparison, doing pretty well is quite good. And I think that's also part of what's going on, that when you compare it to the rest of the world, it sort of looks like the bull run of the century.
But it is still kind of wild. I haven't left the house, and we've still been able to, our team's grown by 80%. There's about 10 people that I've not met before, and they're now, adding huge amounts of value to our team. I don't think they know I'm kind of tall, so surprise.
Let's see.
So we'll, there's a lot of excitement that can happen when we, leave this current condition. But I do think it does bring people to go, what can I do around the clock, 24/7 from my phone, from my home? And there's only a couple of things you can do that, keep your attention span. So one of those things, thank goodness, I've always said, markets keep me off the streets. So it's crypto's kept me busy.
Yeah, I do think crypto industry is already much better than the others comparatively. And crypto normally are getting really used to kind of working in a decentralized environment, decentralized office, decentralized management, and having a decentralized management system to even properly manage and organize 1,000 employees globally. So to be frank, I don't think that heavily impact if you compare with the other sector in the economy.
Absolutely. It's a couple of things that I'm kind of hearing trends is, one, the boomers buying Bitcoin is super interesting. And it's cool to kind of have been in this space long enough to see Bitcoin's brand, this ethereal brand, transform from, the drug money and terrorists use it to like a boomer, someone who's older would actually be interested in maybe diversifying their portfolio into it. That's quite the crazy change in less than a decade. And two, Sam and Lennix and Catherine, all three of you kind of hit on this idea that, the anti-fragility of Bitcoin is kind of shining through in this moment, where, you're seeing this crazy macro event sort of hit these other markets and really take them out, versus, Bitcoin and crypto keeps chugging along. So yeah, I mean, I think those are two very interesting trends. Dan, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild to see Bitcoin transform to what I knew it in 2012, which was like a very niche, very weird thing to be into. I'm pretty sure I was one of the first non-developers to get into it. I mean, I roll up to the Bitcoin meetup in San Francisco, and it's like a dozen people, a cooler of PBRs, and everyone's like talking to me about private key management. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck a private key is, man. Like, look, I've got this like password that protects something. This is way back in the day, right? I was a non-technical user. So for me, the enormity of like how Bitcoin has transformed in terms of both like marketing narrative, but also usability has been huge. It was extremely scary to get into when I got into it. I think even now it's like very off-putting for most people. I think the narratives of like, oh, it's like an illegal drug money currency is still very popular. I would say like if you were to ask someone on the street anywhere in America, which is my main reference point, they would probably be like, oh, like Bitcoin, yeah, my buddy bought some and like made some money on it. And or, oh, don't people use that for drugs? Like, but despite that, Bitcoin in the mainstream, like with Bloomberg and JP Morgan and these other companies, like for them to go, oh, Bitcoin might be a gold 2.0 is phenomenal. I mean, that's what my investment thesis was when I bought Bitcoin in 2012, was that this mimics a lot of like characteristics of gold. So to see some of these big institutions validate that thesis, I think is incredible. And as we undergo one of the craziest experiments in terms of modern monetary theory or money printing or whatever you want to call this new economic environment, Bitcoin shines as this beacon of hope and freedom to go store your value somewhere where it can't be seized very easily, and the monetary policy will be changed.
Just as a breakup here, just to put things in perspective, 2012, the top song on the Billboard was Somebody That I Used to Know, followed by Call Me Maybe. So it's not that long ago, but it's pretty long ago. We've had a lot of waves of music since. So I think there's a lot to come, and I'm excited to see it evolve. But we've certainly seen different industries other than crypto evolve in the last 10 years. So all for it.
I think that's a great reference point. I do feel like Bitcoin or crypto years are kind of like dog years. Like they feel a lot longer than they are. So it's definitely felt like a lot longer than that, but that definitely brings it back into focus. So thanks for sharing that.
So Bloomberg and many Bitcoiners are saying that Bitcoin is gold 2.0. One of the differences between Bitcoin and gold is that Bitcoin's actually its code, and that code needs to be maintained. I'm curious if any of you have any strong opinions about whether exchanges and other Bitcoin businesses have a responsibility towards the Bitcoin code base. Let's go. I'm gonna give this right back to you, Catherine. How do you feel about responsibility of Bitcoin businesses to Bitcoin's code base?
I might actually spin it back over to Lennix. There's a really fascinating thing that we're still in our early days, but I do definitely want to support is grants for Bitcoin core developers to be able to just kind of have the same thing of like how Bitcoin and crypto provided me the freedom to be able to like go and pursue my dreams. We should be able to do that for core developers as well, and just alleviate any of the financial burdens that they're facing so that they can really think creatively and kind of go forth and try and expand on this. So I'm super supportive of these grants being provided. And Lennix, you guys just had one with BitMEX, is that correct? So happy for you to share more on that one.
yeah, our partner exchange Bitcoin do partners BitMEX to have a direct grants for one of the Bitcoin core developers. We think that we still have a lot to do on the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin protocol. For example, the recent SegWit and the recent new version of the Bitcoin Core program that having the Bench 31 address this, or we call the BC1 address this to be available and for the exchange market. So these tiny little change is very important for the Bitcoin user continually to able to use relatively easier and cheaper Bitcoin address, so that they enable a faster payment or sending of money. So I think we will continue to do so. These kind of similar granted to support a truly open source developments and for developers.
See you later, Catherine. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that it's very important to support Bitcoin core development, and it's great to see the companies that are able to afford it support these developers. So big thank you to you guys who do that. We try to do our bit here. We support. I mean, we fund the San Francisco Bitcoin Developer Meetup. I run that personally, and I would add also on top, funding, is extremely important and really helps drive a lot of development and improvements in Bitcoin across the Bitcoin ecosystem. But really, what's been one of the biggest blockers to progress has been kind of the ossified infrastructure of a lot of exchanges and financial and institutions in the space, not upgrading to the latest stuff, not really pushing the envelope. We see a company like Google. They offer a product and then they also kind of push the bleeding edge of the technology they use. We've seen very few exchanges try to push the bleeding edge of Bitcoin. It's always been very conservative, and that's just economic. Being economically rational. Just they focus on trading, not Bitcoin protocol level stuff. But it would be nice to see more institutions really helping push the envelope when actually, using kind of new cutting edge Bitcoin features in their systems, because they're really going to be a big part of what pushes the ecosystem forward.
Totally. Real quick, Catherine, I think you've got to jump. Do you want to give us a last word before you need to head out?
No, I gotta go. My team has our daily meeting, so I want to jump on with them because we're gonna, together we're still building. So thanks. I go Bitcoin. I think it's a great conversation like this to have us all in one room. So really appreciate you guys bringing us together. And there's only thing I ask is that after we finish this, we all open our eyes a little bit wider to see more of the world that we're not serving yet. So with that involved, have a great rest of the week and really excited. Thanks.
Peace. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Let's continue on this. We have not heard from Sam or Dan. Who wants to jump in? Sam?
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest. I think this is like not our sort of relative value add right now. There's lots of amazing work being done on it, and we're sort of there are a lot of people who know a lot more than we do about it, and I think that like what we're going to be pushing forward the most is sort of development of new products in the space. And so I think we're going to be looking at both sort of like tokenized products that we create, also sort of looking at the general ecosystem, looking at the DeFi space, looking at other tokenized products, looking at cool new things you can do with the blockchain, and looking at sort of financial infrastructure and kind of financial product planning, and then just thinking about like what role should these things be playing in our lives, and what can we do to fill important niches. And I think we're going to be way better than that, than we are going to be at trying to compete with some of the best core devs.
Yeah, so I think like we all owe a responsibility to Bitcoin in terms of what it brought to this space and like what it currently brings in terms of our customers. Like the majority of our customers buy Bitcoin. The vast majority of people own at least some Bitcoin. Even if you buy a bunch of other coins, you at least own some Bitcoin. And there's a lot of people who will never own other coins, or they'll own the vast majority of their assets will be held in Bitcoin. So the best way we can work with Bitcoin, I think, isn't just from like sponsoring core development. I think that's actually like a little bit of a cop out. It's kind of like, oh, hey, you're going to sponsor core devs, and I'm like, I'm more of like a capitalist to where I'm like, great, you can donate money, or you could build things at Kraken or other exchanges that interface with Bitcoin to show how a company might build or work with it, which shows like a commercial use case for like working with Bitcoin. Versus like, oh, let's just donate money to some developer who's going to sit there and tinker away on some feature, which is cool. But like, ultimately this comes down to business, and it comes down to like making money. And so I don't believe in just raw donations. I also believe like there's a lot of other aspects about Bitcoin that have been like completely looked over. You got like, like Bitcoin has terrible marketing. There's terrible education around it. Like, why don't we do open source funding of that instead of like constantly pouring this like torrential sort of like waterfall of money on developers? And I'm like, cool, but I don't think we're holistically looking at the problem of like, how does Bitcoin interface with companies and consumers, and addressing it comprehensively through donations through that. So I think like hopefully Kraken, like hopefully some things that we're working on, we can eventually talk about, but I'm hoping that someday we can show like how a business works with Bitcoin. So that would be my best hope for like exchanges in terms of how they work with protocols like Bitcoin.
So I kind of like I like where Alex went with this, and I understand what everyone is saying here. I don't necessarily think like donating to a specific developer is the most efficient thing to improve the protocol, although there's a lot of need in the actual code base. I'm kind of curious. Like Alex did point out that like Bitcoin businesses operating with the bleeding edge of Bitcoin tech and stuff along those lines. Do you guys have opinions on like what features you look for in Bitcoin that you value, and like what would drive you to incorporating more, I guess, cutting edge Bitcoin tech? Lennix, let's start with you. You did talk about Segwit and improvements with just being able to spend Bitcoin cheaply because of innovative technology on that front. What are your takes on that?
Yeah, I personally really I love what the Segwit is a compromise, but actually is proving themselves that the adoption of Segwit getting better and better again, and that's actually growing. I think OK is the very first one who support the Segwit as well, to implement Segwit address as well. So I think that what we need, what Bitcoin code base need to working on the second phase would be an incremental improvement on Segwit currently. So still maintain the security and having a compromise on scalability, but at the same time make it easier. Make it keep on promoting, having onboarding more platform to implement Segwit, and having I particularly love the recent improvement of the Bitcoin Core Pro or the Bitcoin Core version that implemented B31. So that is particularly a great improvement into user experience, and also some of the tiny little features on the Bitcoin Core versions, like the get balance or the set balance, that is particularly useful for whoever want to run a Bitcoin nodes. So actually, that would further promote the decentralizations on Bitcoin network as a whole.
Alex?
I can also add a little bit of my own thoughts here. I think also what's missing is actually some tooling, some open source tooling that makes it easy for Bitcoin exchanges to stay up to date with the latest tech. You can't just run an instance of Bitcoin Core and the Bitcoin Core wallet to support an exchange. You need enterprise grade wallet infrastructure. And that's something we've built from scratch, from the ground up. We have our own Bitcoin service. It could watch millions of individual wallets if we need to. And it talks to Bitcoin Core for consensus code. This is the kind of stuff that we kind of need it out in the open, out in the wild. And it's unclear because every company has very different systems and uses very different programming languages. So there's no one size fits all solution here. But hoping there's some progress there at some point, because I do know a lot of what's holding companies back is they use some code base and then SegWit rolls out, for example, and the code base they're using doesn't have the SegWit update, whether they're using Bitcoin J or some library from 2013, and it is a tricky problem.
All right, so let's move on to. Looks like Lennix needs to leave too. Lennix, do you have last words here?
Yeah, I think I just want to go, but I really want to stress out that it's a really great panel that we can gather all the exchange all around. So it's my first time to join the Bitcoin Magazine panel. So the very last point that I think Bitcoin and crypto exchange as a whole right now is still very, very early stage. Despite the fact that we can do a lot of things, we're still doing a lot of things, but we are still sticking to Bitcoin right now, purely Bitcoin right now, heavily depends on Bitcoin right now. We think we still have a lot to go, have a lot to do. So I'm hoping that despite the fact that we still need a lot of players, we have a lot of donation with different effort to support the Bitcoin development. But I think that adoption and acquiring users for getting people to love Bitcoin, we still have a lot of things that down the road to go. But great panel. Thank you for chatting with you guys too.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So before everyone needs to bounce, I do want to ask one last question because I do think it is a spicy question. But is Bitcoin infrastructure ready for the next bull run? We saw that 2017 really strained infrastructure just across the board. You can imagine that if there is a 2021 bull run or something along those lines, that there's going to be even bigger floodgates opening into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Are exchanges ready for that flow? Let's go to Dan because I think you got to bounce soon too.
Yeah, I mean, you still have a lot of exchanges that haven't adopted SegWit, or blockchain.com hasn't done SegWit yet, which is mind-numbingly stupid. I mean, I don't really understand why, if you clamored for scaling solutions, why you wouldn't implement SegWit immediately. So yeah, I mean, on-chain fees will rise significantly. I think the fee estimators have gotten better, I think, with SegWit. Plus being able, exchanges being smarter about bundling transactions together. I'm not sure if we'll see the exact same spike, but over time, Bitcoin fees on layer 1 will rise. This is a necessary thing that will have to happen to offset the subsidy decreasing through time. The sort of sensitivity to price of Bitcoin transactors is very low. If people are using Bitcoin as a gold 2.0, it doesn't matter if the fee is $20 or $30. They readily pay that fee for wires or for offshore banking or for physical gold delivery. So I don't think Bitcoin really needs much improvement if it's going to act like a gold 2.0. If you want it to be the Swiss Army knife to do gold 2.0 plus cheap PayPal plus everything else, then sure, there's a lot of infrastructure stuff having Lightning be widely adopted and easily used. That would be necessary for that sort of user experience to be fulfilled. But I think Bitcoin in its core premise as a gold settlement mechanism, a digital gold that is relatively cheap percentage-wise to move across the world. I think it does that very, very well now with no improvements to its core protocol.
Thanks, Dan. I mean, part of the question was more even aimed at exchanges, just because volume on exchanges can, really stress infrastructure on that front. Sam, do you feel like exchanges today are ready for potentially an exponential growth in users?
I think exchanges are always going to be ready for yesterday's volume, and that's sort of how it is. They'll always have enough infrastructure to deal with the last thing that happened, and not enough for the next. And I mean, so oversimplification, but no, I don't think the answer is yes. I also don't think the answer is like hopelessly no. I think it's sort of like we're going to see what we saw before. It's like we'll get through it. There's going to be some hardships, and a lot of exchanges are going to kind of wish in retrospect they'd invested in 10 times as much infrastructure as they thought they needed, just in case, because in case happened. And a lot of customers are going to be a bit frustrated, but like things will mostly work enough for us to get to the next phase, and everyone will wish we did better. That's like my honest guess about what's going to happen. And I'd love to say that there's going to be no problems. We got our shit together now. Like no exchange is ever gonna slow down. But that wouldn't be the truth.
Alex.
Yeah, for us, it's we hope we're ready. We have a lot of work left to do for a huge flood of users. We actually, there's also trade-offs, right? Going in the cloud gives you a lot of scalability, but you kind of make some compromises with security and attack surface. We actually run our own server clusters. So scaling for us means buying new machines and throwing them in there. And we have quite a lot of horsepower right now, but we'll see if that lasts us.
Cool. Well,
we can stay ahead of it.
Guys, this was a fun conversation. I know that pretty much everyone has to go. Thanks so much for joining. I guess we can kind of go with like just a quick last word, and y'all can drop off. Let's start with Dan, and then let's go Lennix, Alex, and Sam, and then we'll close this one out.
What would you just kind of a quick one-liner?
Sure, whatever you guys say.
Yeah, I think I couldn't be more bullish than where we are now. Like the macro environment's wild in terms of the rest of the world, like what went on with COVID and the response by central banks. Bitcoin was built for this moment. I think we're all working on really cool companies solving, we're all exchanges, so we're solving a core problem of buying and selling Bitcoin. But I couldn't be more excited about the moment we're in right now and where we're all positioned. So, fingers crossed, but I think 2020 and 2021 are going to be pretty crazy years.
Cool. Lennix.
Yeah, one line should be. The biggest promotions of Bitcoin right now should be global economic and its equity markets.
Yeah, I think the equity market's for real. Alex.
I think stay focused and keep building. Bitcoin isn't going to become successful on its own. It takes all of us to keep going and charging ahead, and don't let people distract you from that.
Cool. Sam, why don't you close us out, man? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We should do this more. I don't know. It was fun. It was interesting. It was a lot better than the phone call I was on before, which was great for what it was, but it's a phone call about tax and structuring and stuff, which is
not a high bar to beat.
It was quite good given that, but boys, that so thanks a lot for having me. I love to get together with other people in the industry. I should do it more. I don't know if any of you are going to be around Hong Kong anytime soon. I would love to see you.
Cool. So. Well, thanks again, Sam. Thanks, Dan and Alex and Lennix and everyone who joined. This was a lot of fun. We'll close this stream out. Cheers, everyone.